Most retirees who fail in Thailand didn't make a mistake with the country, they made a mistake with the town. And that one error is costing them thousands of dollars and years of happiness. Because here's what often happens. Someone comes to Thailand on holiday, they fall in love with a place. Maybe it's Pattaya, maybe it's Hua Hin, maybe it's a quiet little beach town they've discovered. They picture themselves living here. They buy a condo, they sign a lease, they tell their friends they've found paradise. And then 6 months later, they're miserable. Not because Thailand was the wrong choice, because the location was. I've met retirees who moved to a beautiful beach town and felt isolated. I've met retirees who chose busy cities and felt exhausted. I've met people who spent years planning a move to Thailand only to realize they had chosen a place that didn't fit the way they actually wanted to live. And the worst part, most of these mistakes were completely avoidable. Because Thailand isn't one retirement destination, it's dozens of different lifestyles. And in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 biggest location mistakes retirees make, the different types of retirement lifestyles available in Thailand, and how to dramatically improve your chances of choosing the right place before you commit your time, money, and future. Because choosing Thailand is only the beginning. Choosing the right Thailand is the real challenge. Let me paint a picture. You just spent 2 weeks in Thailand. You've had breakfast by the beach. You've wandered through the night markets. You've eaten great food every day. The weather's been fantastic. The people have been friendly. And as you're sitting there watching the sunset, a thought enters your head. I could live here. And maybe you could. But here's the problem. You haven't experienced life there. You've experienced a holiday there. Those are 2 completely different things. You haven't had to visit a hospital. You haven't needed a dentist. You haven't needed a plumber. You haven't dealt with immigration paperwork. You haven't sat at home during a week of rain wondering what to do with yourself. You haven't experienced Tuesdays. And retirement is mostly Tuesdays. Pattaya is a great example. As a visitor, it's easy to see the appeal. Restaurants everywhere, activities everywhere, shopping, healthcare, entertainment, energy. There's always something happening. For 2 weeks, that's exciting. For 10 years, that's a different question. Because the things that make a place exciting on holiday are not always the things that make it comfortable to live in long term. Now let's take the opposite situation. Someone visits a quiet coastal town, maybe Rayong, maybe Bang Saray, maybe somewhere even smaller. The roads are empty, the beach is peaceful, life feels relaxed, and they think, this is exactly what I want. Then 6 months later, they realize something. They're lonely, they miss convenience, they miss activity, they miss having people around. Suddenly the peace they loved started to feel like isolation. And this is why so many retirees make the same mistake. They choose based on how a place feels during the best 2 weeks of the year, instead of asking a much more important question. What will my life actually look like here on an ordinary Tuesday in February? Because that's the question that determines whether you stay. And that brings me to something I've noticed over the years. Not all retirees are looking for the same thing. In fact, most fall into a handful of very different groups. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming there's a best place to retire in Thailand. There isn't, because the best place for me might be completely wrong for you, and the best place for you might be somewhere I'd never choose. Over the years, I've noticed something. Most retirees fall into a handful of different groups, and if you can identify which group sounds most like you, choosing the right location becomes much easier. So as we go through these, ask yourself, which one sounds most like my life? Which one sounds least like my life? You may be surprised by the answer. Some retirees don't want an adventure. They've already had enough adventure. What they want is convenience. They want excellent hospitals, good roads, reliable services, fast internet, shopping, easy transportation, and they don't want life to feel difficult. If that's you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think a lot more retirees fall into this category than they realise. Because when you're 65, 70, 75, convenience isn't a luxury, it's quality of life. That's why places like Bangkok, Pattaya, Jomtien often appeal to this type of retiree. Life simply works. Need a specialist doctor? No problem. Need a new phone? No problem. Need international food? No problem. Need an airport? No problem. The question is, how much noise, traffic, and activity are you willing to accept in exchange for all that convenience? Because every benefit comes with a trade-off. Now, maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you've spent 40 years commuting, 40 years sitting in traffic, 40 years rushing from one thing to another, and now you want something different. You want to hear the ocean. You want morning walks. You want coffee by the beach. You want life to slow down. For people like that, Hua Hin often makes a lot more sense. And for some, Cha'am makes even more sense. Because you're not buying excitement. You're buying atmosphere. You're buying routine. You're buying a different pace of life. Less convenience, less energy, less variety. For some people, that's paradise. For others, it becomes boring. Then there are people who want something even quieter, and I understand the appeal. The older I get, the more I understand it. No crowds, no traffic, no rush, just peace. Then places like Bang Saray and parts of Rayong often attract these kind of people. And when you first arrive, it can feel perfect, almost magical. But here's the question. Do you want peace or do you want isolation? Because those are not the same thing. And many retirees don't discover the difference until they're actually moved. Some retirees aren't looking for an expat lifestyle at all. They're looking for Thailand, real Thailand. Morning markets, Thai neighbours, local restaurants, simple daily routines. The sort of life that feels like a million miles away from where they came from. Places like Prachuap often attract this type of retiree. And honestly, some of the happiest long-term expats I've met fall into this category. Because they've stopped trying to recreate home and started embracing where they actually are. The challenge? The lifestyle rewards independence. It rewards flexibility. And it rewards people who are willing to step outside their comfort zone. And finally, the most common type of all, the dreamer. Most of us, I think, start here. I certainly understand it. The dreamer wants a beautiful beach, excellent healthcare, a thriving social life, low costs, no traffic, no crowds, good shopping, good restaurants, an international airport, and complete peace and quiet. The problem with that is no place offers all those things, at least not for most budgets, because every location in Thailand is a collection of trade-offs, and retirement becomes much easier when you stop looking for perfection and start looking for compatibility. Now here's the interesting thing. Most people can actually identify their type fairly quickly. That's not where the mistake happens. The mistake happens afterwards. Because even when people know what they want, they still make the same 5 location mistakes over and over again. And some of those mistakes can completely change their experience of retirement in Thailand. So by now, you may be already thinking, okay George, I know which type sounds like me, and that's great. But here's the strange thing. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong category. They fail because they make predictable mistakes during the decision process. I've seen these mistakes repeatedly. Some are expensive, some are frustrating, and some quietly ruin what should have been an amazing retirement. Let's start with the biggest one. Thailand is beautiful. That's actually part of the problem, because beautiful places make us imagine beautiful lives. You see a beachfront condo, you see a quiet bay, you see palm trees swaying in the breeze, and your brain immediately starts writing a story. I'll be happy here. But here's the uncomfortable reality of that. A view is not a lifestyle, and some of the most beautiful places in Thailand can become surprisingly difficult places to live. Imagine waking up every morning to a spectacular ocean view. Sounds perfect, except the nearest decent hospital is an hour away. The nearest shopping centre is 40 minutes away. You barely know anyone, and every time you need something, it becomes a small expedition. The view is still beautiful, but your daily life isn't. Retirement isn't experienced through your balcony, it's experienced through your routine. The next mistake is surprisingly common. People copy someone else's retirement plan, and I completely understand why. You found someone who's already done it. They're happy, they recommend a location, it feels safe. But here's the problem. Their life isn't your life. Maybe they're single, maybe you're married, maybe they're extremely social, maybe you're not. Maybe they're healthy and active. Maybe healthcare is a major concern for you. Maybe they love nightlife. Maybe you couldn't care less about that. The fact they're happy somewhere doesn't automatically mean you will be. A good retirement location isn't popular. It's a personal decision. Let's talk about something people don't really like thinking about: healthcare. Because when you're planning retirement, it's very easy to focus on the beaches, restaurants, property prices, cost of living. But healthcare has a funny way of becoming important very quickly. The question isn't, do I need healthcare today? The question is, what happens if I need it 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Because none of us are getting any younger. One of the reasons places like Bangkok, Pattaya and Hua Hin attract retirees is because healthcare infrastructure already exists there. That doesn't mean smaller towns are bad choices. It simply means you need to understand the trade-offs you're making and make them consciously. Now let's talk about the issue almost no one discusses honestly: loneliness. Because moving to Thailand doesn't automatically create a social life. In fact, sometimes it does the opposite. Back home you had routines, friends, neighbours, familiar faces, people who knew you. Then one day you move 6,000 miles away and suddenly all of that disappears. Some people rebuild quickly, others struggle, and many don't realise how important community is until it's missing. Humans can adapt to a lot, but very few people thrive on isolation. This is the one reason why choosing the right town matters so much. Some places naturally create opportunities for connection. Others require far more effort. Neither is better, but one may be better for you. And finally, the mistake that surprises people most is purpose. For years, your life probably had structure: work, responsibilities, deadlines, people depending on you, a reason to get out of bed. Retirement removes a lot of that, which sounds wonderful, and often is for a while. Then eventually a question appears: what now? The happiest retirees I met aren't necessarily the wealthiest, and they're not necessarily living in the most beautiful places. They're the people who found something meaningful to do with their time. Maybe that's volunteering, maybe it's fitness, maybe it's learning Thai, maybe it's content creation, maybe it's helping others, maybe it's simply being part of a community. The goal isn't just to retire from something, it's to retire into something. So if these are the mistakes, how do you avoid them? How do you actually choose a location that fits your lifestyle rather than your fantasy? Because that's really the question every future retiree needs to answer. And that's what I'll encourage you to think about next. So how do you avoid all of this? How do you avoid becoming one of those people who arrives in Thailand full of excitement, only to discover 6 months later they've chosen the wrong place? Well, I think it starts by asking better questions. Not what's the best place in Thailand, and not where does everyone else live. Instead ask, what kind of life do I actually want? Because once you're clear on that, the location often starts narrowing themselves down surprisingly quickly. If I could only ask one question, it would probably be this. What does your ideal Tuesday look like? Not your holiday, not your dream vacation, a normal Tuesday. Do you wake up and walk to the coffee shop? Do you drive somewhere? Do you exercise? Do you spend time with friends? Do you enjoy browsing markets? Do you like sitting quietly by the sea? Do you need activity around you? Or do you need peace? Most retirement decisions become much easier when you stop planning the highlights and start planning the ordinary days. Because retirement is mostly ordinary days. And that's not a bad thing. That's where life actually happens. The second question is convenience. And be honest here, a lot of people underestimate how much convenience matters, especially as they get older. Do you want hospitals nearby, shopping malls, international supermarkets, reliable transport, easy airport access? If the answer is yes, that's perfectly reasonable. But it may point you towards different locations than somebody who values peace and quiet above everything else. The next question is one many people don't ask themselves honestly. Do you actually enjoy being around people? Because some retirees absolutely thrive in active social environments. They enjoy meeting people, joining clubs, attending events, being part of the community. Others are perfectly happy with a smaller circle, a few close friends, a quiet routine, more personal space. Neither approach is right or wrong, but they're very different lifestyles, and different locations support them differently. Here's another useful exercise. Ask yourself, what worries me most about retirement in Thailand? Is it healthcare, loneliness, getting bored, driving, language, being too far from the family? Because often the answer to that question tells you more than your wish list ever will. And perhaps the most important question of all, what are you willing to trade? Because every location in Thailand involves trade-offs. Every single one. If you want convenience, you may sacrifice some peace. If you want peace, you may sacrifice some convenience. If you want authenticity, you may sacrifice some familiarity. If you want a large expat community, you may sacrifice some local character. The retirees who seem happiest aren't the ones who found perfection. They're the ones who accepted the trade-offs that suited them best. And this brings us to perhaps the biggest reality check of all. Because even if you've answered every one of these questions honestly, even if you've narrowed your shortlist down to 2 or 3 different locations, there's still something you can't learn from YouTube. And it's something that causes more retirement mistakes than almost anything we've discussed so far. Here's the truth. And it may sound strange coming from someone who makes YouTube videos about Thailand. YouTube is not enough. Neither is Facebook, neither are forums, neither are property websites, and neither is a 2-week holiday. Because no video can tell you how a place feels. You can watch hundreds of YouTube videos about Hua Hin, but until you walked around Hua Hin yourself at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, you don't really know Hua Hin. You don't know how the road feels. You don't know whether the neighborhood suits you. You don't know if the pace feels relaxing or boring. You don't know whether you'll love it or feel disconnected from it. And the same thing is true for Pattaya, Jomtien, Chatham, Rayong, Bangsaray, Prachuap, or anywhere else. The reality is that choosing a retirement location isn't really about comparing places. It's about comparing yourself to those places. You're testing fit, compatibility, lifestyle, routine, energy, community, practicality. And that's incredibly difficult to do from the other side of the world. That's why many people choose to spend time exploring multiple locations before making any major commitment. Some do it independently. Others prefer a more structured approach. They'll spend time in different locations, look at accommodation, visit hospitals, explore neighborhoods, talk to residents, test daily routines, and slowly narrow things down. And for some people, having local guidance through that process can be helpful. Not because they can't do it themselves, but because it can save time, avoid common mistakes, and provide a clearer picture of what day-to-day life might actually look like. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about finding the most popular place in Thailand. It's about finding the place that feels like home. So let me leave you with one final thought. Most people spend months researching Thailand. They compare visa options, healthcare, property prices, cost of living, weather, and all those things matter for sure. But when I look at the retirees who seem genuinely happy here, the people who have built a life rather than simply relocated, something else stands out. They found a place that fits them. Not somebody else's idea of retirement, their idea of retirement. I've met people living in Bangkok who wouldn't swap it for anything. I've met people in Pattaya who absolutely love the convenience and the energy. I've met people in Hua Hin who tell me they've found exactly the pace of life they were looking for. And I've met people in small towns like Prachuap who can't imagine living anywhere else. Who's right? Well, actually, all of them. Because retirement isn't really about finding the best place. It's about finding your place. And that's why I think so many people struggle. They're searching for a location, when what they're really searching for is a lifestyle, a routine, a community, a future. The town is simply where those things happen. A few years from now, you won't care which YouTube video convinced you. You won't care which Facebook group recommended a location. You probably won't even care which property you nearly bought. You will care about how your life feels. Do you enjoy your mornings? Do you have people around you that you trust? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel healthy? Do you feel connected? Do you feel at home? Because ultimately, that's what a successful retirement looks like. And if you're still trying to work all of this out, that's completely normal. Most people do. In fact, I'd be surprised if you weren't. If you'd like help thinking through your options, whether that's comparing locations, understanding visa pathways, or planning a scouting trip before your retirement here, you'll find the details below. My team and I are always happy to point people in the right direction. Thanks for watching today, guys, and I'll see you in the comments.